Good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Jack Rotherham. I am the publisher at The Hill. And thank you for joining us today at our Newsmaker event this morning. We will begin our conversation with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin in just a few minutes. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, EJF Capital, for making this program possible. We greatly appreciate it. At the beginning of this week, The Hill launched a 7-part investigative series examining the Republican Party's signature legislative achievement since 2017, the enactment of major tax reductions. Today's live event is a part of that series, and we look forward to speaking with the Treasury Secretary not only about the behind-the-scenes meetings and strategies that led to the revamp of the nation's tax law, but also about how the new law is playing out across the country and more as we look forward. But first, a little housekeeping. In addition to our audience here at the Washington Court Hotel, we're on Facebook Live and are live streaming on thehill.com/events. Please keep your phones on silent, but we do encourage you to engage in the discussion on social media. In fact, you can follow us on Twitter at The Hill Events and comment using the hashtag #TheHillNewsmaker. Before we begin, I'd like to invite Neil Wilson, co-founder and chief operating officer of EJF Capital, to the podium to offer a few brief remarks. Welcome, Neil, and thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Jack. I appreciate the introduction. I'm Neil Wilson. I'm co-founder and chief operating officer of EJF Capital. We're a $7.5 billion asset management company headquartered here in Washington, D.C., with offices in London and Shanghai. On behalf of EJF, it's a pleasure to sponsor today's Newsmaker series with The Hill's editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack, and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. It's refreshing in a hyper-polarized political environment to have a zealously bipartisan organization such as The Hill to host and shepherd events like today's meeting with Secretary Mnuchin. As for EJF, for those unfamiliar, our firm is a regulatory, event-driven firm, asset management firm, and we're keenly focused on the financial services and real estate sectors. EJF operates at the crossroads of capital and the constantly shifting regulatory environment where most of the impactful investments are available to us. Be it Dodd-Frank, the TARP program, or the recently enacted Qualified Opportunity Zone legislation, we at EJF pride ourselves on translating well-intentioned DC policies into actionable investments. With that context, today's discussion couldn't be more relevant. Regardless of your political leaning, we can all likely agree that Secretary Mnuchin and this administration have made a significant impact on the regulatory environment, on taxes, and on the economy as a whole. On regulation, the administration has completed its sweep of Fed appointments, including Jay Powell as chairman of the Federal Reserve and Randy Quarles as the Federal Reserve's vice chairman of supervision. They've installed an acting director of the CFPB and named a successor in waiting. They've named a new head of Ginnie Mae and an opportunity next year or soon to appoint a head regulator of the GSEs once those positions become available early next year. In short, the administration and Secretary Mnuchin will soon likely have their full slate of appointed regulators installed at agencies overseeing the $16.7 trillion banking industry and the $10.8 trillion mortgage market. This says nothing of the success of passing the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017 that Jack referenced. Out of that law has come a number of significant changes to the tax code, changes in tax brackets, cash repatriation, and most relevant to EJF and like-minded social impact investors, the provision outlining opportunity zones. Opportunity zones provisions of the tax bill passed last year incentivize the investment of private capital into low-income communities throughout the United States, and we think that's very significant. These communities, the neighborhoods most in need of investment capital, have not historically attracted private investment, but the Opportunity Zone legislation seeks to fix that with tax-driven carrots or incentives. Unique in today's Washington, D.C. environment, Opportunity Zone legislation has benefited from a bipartisan mix of legislators and policymakers. From the bill's sponsor, South Carolina's Republican Senator Tim Scott, to its co-sponsor, New Jersey Democrat Cory Booker, Opportunity Zone legislation has garnered the attention and won praise from both sides of the aisle, political aisle, as well as at the state government level and within the social impact investing community. At EJF, we believe the Opportunity Zone legislation has the potential to fundamentally transform low-income neighborhoods by adding jobs in these areas. Opportunity Zones also hold the promise of shifting investment from the wealthiest areas of our country to places most in need. And this point is critical. The legislation amplifies capital movement from rich to poor areas by incentivizing banking institutions to lend and invest in Opportunity Zone neighborhoods and businesses, and we think that is exciting. In D.C., where the word compromise can be interpreted as capitulation, the bipartisanship around this legislation really stands out. So we're very surprised that Secretary Mnuchin and the administration was able to get this piece as part of the Tax Reform Act, and we look forward to hearing his comments about this and other issues over the next 30 minutes. With that, I'll hand it back to Jack.